Welcome back to Learn with Chris. I'm Chris. Today I'm going to make a long video. I assume it'll be more than an hour, maybe an hour and a half, quite long, because I have a lot of stuff to talk about. So this video is going to be about Odin as a god of knowledge. And I have come up with 9 different areas to talk about from different sources, different poems, which is related to Odin as a god of knowledge. 9, of course, being the sacred number for Norse, so it's an appropriate number to use. I'm going to work on this video over a couple of days, and I hope to release it on Wednesday, which of course is another appropriate day. Now, as an introduction, I'll tell you the 9 areas I'm going to look at, and I'm going to create timestamps for all of these so that you can skip ahead to whatever area you want to read, or you want to focus on, because it's going to be a very long video. Actually, I should say I hope I can add timestamps because I've never done it before, but I assume I can figure it out. So the first one, this is going to be 9. So the first area I'm going to talk about is Hugin and Munin. So Odin's ravens, related to them as sources of information and knowledge for Odin. The second aspect I'm going to look at is the poem Vafthrudnismal, which is Odin's kind of knowledge contest with the wisest of giants called Vafthrudnir. The third thing I'm going to talk about is the poem Grímnismál, which is basically Odin giving out a lot of knowledge about his understanding of Norse cosmology and lore. The fourth thing I'm going to talk about is Seiðr Magic. So I've talked about this before. It's a bit of an oversimplification to say that Seiðr Magic is the feminine magic and Galdr is the male magic. That's true, but it's a simplification because men can do Seiðr, although it was very frowned upon, and women could also do Galdr, right? But it was primarily done, Galdr was primarily, the chanting, the runes, was primarily done by men, and Seiðr magic of divination and seeing the future and guiding faith was primarily done by women. But Odin learned Seiðr Magic, again related to his quest for knowledge. So that'll be the 4th topic I'll talk about. The 5th topic will be about, the 5th topic I'll do will be about Voluspa as a whole. And the concept there is that Odin, using his necromancy, raised the vulva from the dead because he wanted to question her, he wanted to get information from her, both about the creation, the beginning, and as well as the end. So it's like a creation myth as well as an eschatology. So of course that's Ragnarok, right? So the primary thing he wanted to know was about the end of the world, about Ragnarok. The 6th topic I'll look at are the runes. This is going to be from Havamal 138 and 139, stanzas 138, 139, where Odin hung himself on Yggdrasil for 9 days, a sacrifice to himself. He sacrificed himself to himself in order to gain the knowledge of the runes. And then we'll talk about the 18 magic runes that he discovered through that sacrifice. The 7th topic will be the Well of Mimir, where Odin sacrifices eye to drink from the well and to gain knowledge or wisdom. The 8th topic will be about the Mead of Poetry, which I have done a video on already, so that'll be probably pretty brief. But the idea there is that the creature that the Mead of Poetry comes from, Kvasir, he was not just, well, he was wise and knowledgeable. So the Mead of Poetry is not just allowing you to be poetic, it's also giving you knowledge as well. And the 9th and final will be from the Havamal poem itself, the wise advice in the first part of the Havamal, which Odin gives out. So it's the advice of Odin, the wisdom of Odin. So there's a lot to cover, and this is going to take some time. So we're going to start with the first topic, Hugin and Munin. Odin's ravens. So the source for this is going to be in two different places. The first is in the Prose Edda, Gylfaginnin, the bottom half of chapter 38. The top half of chapter 38 is talking about the Einherjar, which I have actually talked about previously. But the bottom half specifically talks about Hugin and Munin. And as well, it actually references the Poetic Edda, Grímnismál stanza 20, and that'll be the other thing that we'll look at. So the two areas that we'll look at for Hugin and Munin, Gylfaginnin 38 and Grímnismál 20. So let's have a look at these poems. So this is from the Voluspa.org website, and let's just read through this. The ravens sit on his shoulders and say to his ear all the tidings which they see or hear. They are called thus Hugin and Munin. He sends them at daybreak to fly about all the world, and they come back at undermeal. Thus he is acquainted with many tidings. Therefore men call him Raven God, as is said. And the next one will be, this is actually the quote from Grímnismál stanza 20. Hugin and Munin hover each day the wide earth over. I fear for Hugin lest he fare not back, yet watch I more for Munin. And I'll put the Norse over here as well. Not going to read through this because my pronunciation is not very good for Norse, but I do want to just introduce the names. Þeir heita svo Hugin og Munin. They are called Hugin and Munin. So Grímnismál 20, put it up here. Over Midgarth, Hugin and Munin both each day set forth to fly. For Hugin I fear lest he come not home, but for Munin my care is more. So it's the same thing that we just read from Gylfaginnin, just paraphrased a bit differently. And from Jackson Crawford's translation of the Poetic Edda, I'll just bring up Grímnismál and we can see what it says. Thought and memory, my ravens, fly every day the whole world over. Each day I fear that thought might not return, but I fear more for memory. So of course, thought is Hugin and memory is Munin. And that's literally what the names of the ravens mean. So there's definitely debate and discussion about what it means that Odin is sending out his thoughts and sending out his memory every day to gain knowledge of the world, right? So back to Gylfaginnin 38, he sends them at daybreak to fly about all the world, and they come back at undermeal. I had to check what undermeal is. It's some archaic word. I never heard it before, but it's mid-morning. So he sends them out at dawn. Basically, the two ravens fly out over Midgard or over the world. Although in Norse, it actually says, Jormungand. So I guess that's another word for Midgard or another word for the earth. So the two ravens, Hugin and Munin, they leave Odin's shoulder, or they leave his side at dawn at daybreak, and they fly around the world. I guess they're flying really, really quickly, and they come back mid-morning. So they're not gone too long, only a few hours, and then they return with many tidings. So they return back to Odin and they tell him what they have seen or heard. So they're kind of like reconnaissance ravens. They're spies. They're bringing back information about the goings on in Midgard, in the world. Now, about the fear for Hugin, but fear more for Munin. So from Grímnismál stanza 20, over Midgard, Hugin and Munin both each day set forth to fly. For Hugin I fear, lest he not come home, but for Munin my care is more. So thought and memory, Hugin, Hugin is thought, Munin is memory. Does Odin lose these aspects of him? Are the ravens an aspect of him? He's literally devoid of his thought and memory for those few hours that the ravens are out traveling around the world. And he fears for both, because obviously he wants his mind back, he wants his thoughts back, and he wants his memory back. Although he fears for his memory, or for Munin, more. It's questionable why. I mean, what's more important, your thoughts or your memory? I mean, they're both important, but I'm not sure which one I would prefer to lose. If you have Alzheimer's disease, you can't remember anything. That's your memory gone. That's really bad, of course. But if you have no thoughts, I don't know. I'm not really sure the reason why Odin fears more for losing his memory or losing Munin than Hugin. If you have any ideas about that, please comment in the notes, in the comments. So the overall idea for this is that, again, Odin as a god of knowledge. So he's actually losing a part of himself, or potentially risking his memory and risking his mind, his thoughts every day as these are manifested as ravens. My interpretation, I mean, I don't know if they're literally ravens flying around, or they are ravens, they are his thought and his memory in the form of ravens. They become manifest as birds, as ravens, and then they fly out. But he's risking them, right? Because they might not return every day, and he fears that, especially Munin, his memory, not returning. So as we go through this list of different poems related to Odin with the god of as the god of knowledge and wisdom, he's doing a lot of risking. He's doing a lot of sacrificing. He sacrifices himself on the tree, of course. He sacrifices his eye. So he's going through a lot to obtain the knowledge that he gets. And I'll do a conclusion at the end of the video, and I'll kind of summarize why I think that Odin was so obsessed with gaining knowledge, and the reason why he did all of the sacrifices that he did, or he risked all the things that he risked. But I'll leave that for the conclusion, for the end. And last thing I want to look at here is, again, a little bit of music. So from Wadrun Helvegen, because they mentioned the ravens in the song. And let me just put up the picture here, and then you could look at we can listen a little bit to the music. So in English, this is from the song, about midway through the song. Early or in fading day, still the raven knows if I fall. So I think this is connected. I think they got this lyric. I don't know. I don't know the writer of the song, of course, but I'm just kind of guessing that this lyric comes from Gylfaginning 38. Where they mention that, at daybreak, the ravens are sent out, right? So early or in fading day. I mean, obviously fading day is evening, so it's not directly the same, but I think the idea is, I think this is where they got the idea from, effectively. And of course, the raven knows if I fall. Of course, the raven, of course, being Hugin or Munin, and they're observing, so they know everything that's happening, right? And this, of course, relates with the ravens as carrion birds. Obviously, they're flying around battlefields because they're carrion eaters, right? So that's also a connection too, but that's again related to Odin as the god of death. So just have just a listen to these couple of parts of this song. Now they have another song called White Raven, which I do not think is directly drawn from the Prose Edda or from the Poetic Edda. From the lyrics, it doesn't appear to be, but it is a very, very good song. And if you're interested in Viking music, I would recommend checking out Wadruna, basically all of their songs. But White Raven is another one related to knowledge and but I don't draw any direct sources from the Eddas. At least I don't see it. It doesn't mean it's not there. I just don't see it myself because I'm not an expert on this stuff. I'm just just reading it and trying to put pieces together. Okay, so that's all I have to say about Hugin and Munin, Odin's ravens. So the next topic to look at is Vafthrudnismal, the poem from the Poetic Edda. Okay, continuing on with our second point, Vafthrudnismal Poem. So the basic idea here is that there's this giant called Vafthrudnir, and he's considered to be the wisest and most knowledgeable of all the Jotnar, all the giants. Odin wants to go challenge him to a knowledge contest, a wisdom contest. Frigg, his wife, Odin's wife, kind of recommends him not to go, but to stay home. Odin goes anyway. And as we're going to see in a couple of stanzas, there's a pretty strong risk to this challenge because it's a challenge to the death. In stanza 7 and 19, I'll show you later, you lose your head if you lose the challenge. So challenging a giant to a knowledge contest is life or death, right? So it's a pretty serious thing to do. But Odin does it anyway. So I think this speaks a lot about both Odin's his desire or his obsession with knowledge, because he's willing to risk his life to obtain knowledge. And as we see from the poem itself, he learns quite a lot of information from the giant. In particular, at the end of it, between stanzas 44 and 53, Odin learns a lot about Ragnarok and the events of Ragnarok from the giant, which of course is key to Odin. He wants to know all about Ragnarok because he wants to prevent it from happening or to win the fight, right? So let's have a look at let's bring up some of the poem here. So let's have a look at stanza 1 and stanza 2. Now I'm going to be reading from Jackson Crawford's Poetic Edda translation. So Vafthrudnismal is the third poem in the Poetic Edda. So stanza 1 and stanza 2. Odin said, "Advise me now, Frigg. I want to travel to visit Riddle Weaver, and I want to have a contest about old lore with that wise giant." Frigg said, "I advise you, Odin, father of battles, to stay here in the homes of the giants. I don't think there's any giant who is as wise as Riddle Weaver." Now, Odin, Jackson Crawford translates Vafthrudnir's name as Riddle Weaver, and later he's going to translate Odin's name, the name Odin gives the giant, because remember that when Odin, on all of the journeys of Odin, he never uses his own name, right? He has like 200 different names. He always uses another name. He's always in disguise, right? The name that he goes by is going to be Gagenrother, and Jackson Crawford translates it as good advisor. And I believe the reason why he's using these pretty easy names instead of the Norse names is because they're extremely difficult to pronounce and they're very foreign for English speakers, right? I'm struggling with pronouncing the names myself. So, so stanza 1 and stanza 2, Odin tells his wife, I want to go have a riddle contest with a giant. she advises him to stay home because that giant, Vafthrudnir, is the wisest of all of the giants. And remember that this is a knowledge contest to the death. If Odin loses, he loses his head, right? So that's going to come up in two different stanzas, 7 and 19. So if you look at stanza 7, it says, Riddle Weaver said, "Who is this man who stands in my hall? Who is this I'm speaking to? You won't leave my hall unless you prove yourself to be even wiser than I am. You won't leave my hall," right? So you're never going to get out of here unless you prove yourself to be wiser than I am. So it's like, do or die, right? And stanza 19 says, Riddle Weaver said, "You are wise indeed, guest. Come sit at my bench and let's talk together here. Let's wager our heads on which of us two is wiser here in my hall, guest." So it's a knowledge contest to the death. So in stanzas 11, I'm not going to go through all of the examples of the stanzas because I don't think it's relevant to what I'm talking about here as Odin as a god of knowledge, but just kind of briefly go over it. Stanzas 11 through 18, Vafthrudnir is asking questions to Odin, and Odin answers all of them successfully. That's where at stanza 19 he says, let's get serious and wager our heads, right? And then Odin asks 12 questions to Vafthrudnir through, it's all about cosmology, it's about the names of, well, I'll just give you a couple of examples. How did Earth come to be? Which was the first giant? How did night come to be, or night which passes above with its waxing and waning moon? How did this winter come to be, or the first summer? Who's the oldest being, or god or giant who appeared in the oldest times? So he's just asking kind of like history questions, and he asks 7 questions to Vafthrudnir, and Vafthrudnir answers all of them. And then around stanza 44, it switches to be related to Ragnarok. And I think this is the whole point. This is why Odin is there, because Vafthrudnir has knowledge of Ragnarok and Odin wants it. So he's asking questions about Ragnarok. Starting on stanza 44, he has, will any humans remain alive after Fimbulvinter has passed over Midgard? So that's related to Ragnarok, of course. And the answer is there's two humans that will remain alive. How will there still be a sun when the wolf has eaten the one that now flies in heaven? Because of the idea, of course, is that 2 wolves, was it 2 wolves? I think 2 wolves will eat one wolf will eat the sun and the other wolf will eat the moon at Ragnarok, and it'll be all darkness, right? Like 3 years of darkness, which they call Fimbulvinter, or Fimbulwinter. And other questions that Odin asks, which gods will inherit Asgard when the fires of Ragnarok go out? How will Odin lose his life at Ragnarok? So that's on stanza 52. And Vafthrudnir answers all of these questions. And now the riddle contest ends with Odin winning when he asks a question that Vafthrudnir has no ability to know the answer to. So this is stanza 54. Odin said, "I have traveled so much, I have tried much, and I have often tested the mighty. What did Odin whisper in Baldur's ear before he placed him on the pyre?" Vafthrudnir says, "No one knows what you said in those ancient days in your son's ear. I have spoken my aged wisdom. I have told you of Ragnarok. I have spoken with a doomed mouth. Now I know that I wagered my head against Odin's in wisdom, but you, Odin, are forever the wisest of all." So, when Vafthrudnir says, "No one knows what you said," because Odin's question wasn't, "What did I say?" in what did I whisper into Baldur's ear? He said, because he's not Odin, right? He's disguised as Gagenrother, but once he says that, Vafthrudnir immediately understands, oh, this is Odin that I'm talking to, and nobody knows what you whispered into Baldur's ear, so I can't answer the question. Therefore, you have won the test of the knowledge contest or the wisdom contest. I've spoken with the doomed mouth. That's interesting. Although, hold on. The poem ends here. So there's no indication that Odin killed Vafthrudnir. Although it maybe, because I've spoken with the doomed mouth. So Vafthrudnir is kind of saying, I'm doomed because I have lost the contest. But the last stanza, when he says, now I know I have wagered my head against Odin's in wisdom, but you, Odin, are forever the wisest of all. So maybe the doom is not Vafthrudnir's life, but maybe the doom is his, let's call it, title as the wisest of them all. Now that's going to Odin because Odin has won that particular knowledge contest. Maybe he killed him. It doesn't say. It just ends there, so we don't know. But okay, so just to kind of recap this, Odin challenges the wisest being of all, and the challenge is extremely risky because if he loses that challenge, he will die. He'll lose his head. Odin wins the challenge, right? So this says something, of course, about Odin, about how important knowledge is to Odin, and also what he is willing to do, what he's willing to risk to obtain knowledge, right? And this is going to be a recurring theme. So we already mentioned about the ravens, right? Odin is risking his thought and his memory by sending out the ravens every day. Here he's risking his head. He's being tortured in Grímnismál. He starts a war, the Seiðr war, to get the magic of Seiðr. The runes, obviously, he sacrificed himself on a tree for the runes. He took out his eye. So it's a recurring theme that Odin is losing something or risking something to gain knowledge. Okay, so that's Vafthrudnismal, hard word to say. Let's continue with the third point, which is another poem, and let me see if it's immediately the next poem. So Vafthrudnismal is the third poem in the Poetic Edda. Grímnismál is the fourth poem. Okay, so let's talk about Grímnismál, the fourth poem in the Poetic Edda. And this is our 3 out of 9 items to talk about related to Odin as the god of knowledge. So in Grímnismál, Odin is again disguised. This time he's called Grímni, and he's captured. He's being tortured. He's got spending 8 days between 2 bonfires, given no food and no water. Very quickly into the poem itself, only on the third stanza, he says something quite interesting related to knowledge. So let's have a read here. So stanza 2 and stanza 3. I sat between the fires here for 8 nights, and no one offered or gave me food except Agnar alone. Now Agnar will be the sole ruler of the land of the Goths. Hail Agnar, it's the chief of the gods who's wishing you well. You will never be repaid so well for one drink, no matter how long you live. So Agnar, the son of the king, took pity on this Grímni character who's being tortured, and he did give him a drink. And just through that alone, Odin is going to effectively bless Agnar to be the sole ruler, which means that Agnar's father is going to die, and Agnar will take over the kingdom. You will never be repaid so well for one drink, no matter how long you live. And the payment is not only a kingdom, but the payment is knowledge and information, which gets us to the whole point of this Grímnismál poem as to why it's included in my list here for reasons why Odin is a god of knowledge. So, unlike Vafthrudnismal, he's not in competition. It's not a contest. He's just offering a whole bunch of lore, information, cosmology to Agnar, and that in itself appears to be quite valuable, right? So, you helped me, you gave me a drink, and I'm going to teach you, I'm going to show you so much information that other people don't know, and you will never be paid so well for a drink. So, like, it's viewed as very, very valuable, very, very valuable information, right? And I'm not going to go through the poem. This is not a poem that I particularly find interesting. It's full of place names, it's full of names of halls, it's full of names of people and animals and gods and giants, and a lot of it probably it's only seen here, so it's a lot of individual names that I don't know who they are. So it doesn't read very easily. It's like a lore poem, more or less. So, but I'm not going to go through any of it. I just want to kind of sum it up a little bit. But the whole point, of course, is that Odin is offering all of this knowledge to Agnar as a reward for taking pity on him and offering him a drink, right? So, just going through it. So the stanzas 4 through 16, it's all about the different halls of the different gods. So not all of them, but a lot of them, right? So what's the name of Odin's hall? What's the name of Freya's hall? What's the name of Thor's hall? Where is it? So it's place names, it's locations. And that's like 12 stanzas are just the names of the halls of some Aesir gods and some Vanir gods. Stanzas 18 through 26, it's all about Valhalla and things related to Odin. 27 to 30 is a whole bunch of rivers, names of rivers. So again, it's not interesting. And like 4 stanzas just full of names of rivers, right? So it's very obscure information. I don't know why Odin considered it to be valuable, but it's included there. Stanzas 31 to 35 are about Yggdrasil, and that actually is interesting, at least to me. And I've included some of that information in my Yggdrasil video as well. Stanzas 36 to 44, just random names, random pieces of lore and information. And then from 45 until the end of the poem, it's just names of Odin. Remember that Odin has about 200 names. So it's a long list of Odin's names, and at the end of it, he reveals himself to be Odin, not Grímni, and the king ends up like falling on his own sword and dying. But that's it. That's Grímnismál. So it's lore, it's knowledge, it's information, it's the names of place names, rivers, places. So it's a lore poem, right? But a lot of it's so obscure that it's not very interesting reading, right? Vafthrudnismal is much more interesting, I think, and certainly a lot of the other poems are. But that's all I have to say about Grímnismál. But again, Odin considered extremely important and valuable because he's offering this knowledge as a gift to Agnar. So it is important from Odin's perspective as a god of knowledge, right? Okay, so the fourth thing I'm going to talk about is 4 out of 9. The fourth thing is about Seiðr Magic. Now, this is largely up to interpretation. But the basic idea here is that the first name of a goddess, a Vanir goddess who knew this Seiðr Magic. Remember that Seiðr Magic is the magic of divination, the magic of guiding or shaping fate, the magic of telling the future, prophecies. So the first goddess who had this knowledge was Gulveg. And she was killed in Odin's halls with spears. So it doesn't directly say that Odin killed her, but I think the implications are there. It was definitely in Odin's hall, and she was killed with spears. Odin, of course, is quite famously known to carry a spear Gungnir, right? So she was killed 3 times, and she kept on being reborn. But then she came into another person. She was reborn after the 3rd time that she was killed by the Aesir gods, and she was reborn into a sorceress called Hethi. And a lot of kind of confusion about who she is, because I think this is literally the only place. By the way, this is in the Voluspa, which I'll show you in a minute. That's where this comes from. But Hethi, she's not mentioned anywhere else. And there's some kind of debate about her being Freya, another name for Freya. Now, Freya is well known for her Seiðr Magic, and she was the one who taught Odin that magic. So remember that because Seiðr is primarily the female magic, in Norse society, it was considered quite unmanly, quite effeminate, or even homosexual for a man to be able to do any type of divination or soothsaying or telling the future, anything like that. By the way, that was one of my initial criticisms of the Viking, the TV show, like right in the very first episode, season 1, episode 1. When I watched that, I think I found like 4 or 5 mistakes in it, and it kind of put me off the whole thing because I felt it was too many mistakes here. But one of the mistakes in that was the I don't even remember the names of any of the characters, but the wife of Ragnar, I guess, I don't know her name because I didn't watch it very much, but she went to a man to get in, you know, a man doing Seiðr Magic, right? That would have been like a no-no. A complete no-no at all. It should have been a woman in the TV show. But it was a man. Now, I'm not saying that there were no men who practiced Seiðr Magic, but they would have been outcasts, or they would have been considered, again, very, very unmanly, right? Odin, as a god who learned Seiðr Magic, actually gets some shit for this from Loki in particular in Lokasenna. So let me just read the relevant information here. So I think my main point here about this is that magic is a form of knowledge, of course, and it's obviously related to power, but because it's the magic of telling the future, divination, this is extremely important to Odin. Odin did a lot of things related to finding out the future, particularly Ragnarok, right? So the whole thing with the vulva that he raised to question the whole story of the Voluspa poem, that's about finding out the future, right? So Odin is quite keen, quite eager to learn about the future because he's concerned about Ragnarok. So he's willing to kind of break this, societal rule of Seiðr Magic only being feminine, and he's going to learn it himself because of whatever advantages he's going to learn from that magic and whatever knowledge and power he's going to get from it, he's really willing to take the risk of being considered effeminate, right? And Loki actually quite specifically says that. But let's look at Voluspa 21, which is talking about Gullveig, and 22 as well. And then we'll look at Lokasenna 24, where Loki is insulting Odin because he has this knowledge, right? Okay, so let's bring up Voluspa 21. Okay, again, Jackson Crawford translation. I remember the first murder ever in the world, when Gullveig was pierced by spears and burned in Odin's halls. They burned her 3 times. She was reborn 3 times. Often killed, not a few times. Still she would live again. They named her Heith when she came into their homes, a sorceress who foresaw good things. She knew magic, she knew witchcraft, she practiced witchcraft. She was the pride of an evil family. I said Heith because that's how it's written here, but it would be Heithi. So, first murder, Gullveig, and Gullveig was a Vanir goddess, pierced by spears, burned in Odin's hall. So strongly indicating that Odin was the one, at least involved in this, or instigated this, or wanted this to happen. I'm kind of maybe, what do you say? I don't know, grasping at straws, but perhaps Odin wanted this transformation to happen into Heithi or into Freya so that he could learn. So it's kind of like, I don't know, maybe that's too much, that's too much stretching perhaps. But Odin did learn Seiðr Magic from Freya. We do know that. Whether he instigated the murder of Gullveig to get her to transform into Heithi and get Seiðr Magic that way, and maybe that's a stretch. Maybe that's a stretch, but it does feel a little bit compelling to me. And let's look at Lokasenna 24. So Lokasenna is the insults of Loki, and he gets into a lot of trouble from that. So 24. Loki said, actually, hold on. So this is Loki talking to Odin. Loki said, but people say that you practiced womanly magic on Samse, dressed as a woman. You lived as a witch among the humans, and I call that a pervert's way of living. When we look at the Norse for this, it's not going to say ergi, which would be ergi is the kind of like the biggest insult you could give a Norse man. It's I think it's in modern language we would probably say a bottom homosexual. So ergi would be a gay person who, gets penetrated instead of doing the penetrating. So as unmanly as you could get, I suppose. But that's ergi. But here it's going to be from the noun. Let me find it very quickly here. Lokasenna 24. Arts. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. ARGS, but that would be the noun. That would be the noun form. So Loki, basically he called Odin a faggot, basically, because Odin practiced womanly magic, Seiðr Magic, right? So again, Odin is willing to he's willing to accept the biggest insult that a Norseman could be given. Because this kind of stuff, if again, in modern language, if you called somebody a faggot in Norse society, that would be quite legal grounds for you. If somebody called you that, if they insulted you in that way or slandered you that way, it's so damaging to your reputation that you could quite literally challenge them to a fight to the death. Right, the holmgang, right, where they draw the circle. They go on an island and they have the circle, and they basically have this bunch of rules with their shields and their swords. You know, the shield can break, 2 times or 3 times or whatever the rules are, but a ritualized combat to the death. So if you called somebody gay, that's grounds. That's sufficient justification to challenge somebody to a fight to the death. So it's pretty serious stuff, right? So they took that quite seriously. So Odin was willing to be, only Loki had the balls to actually accuse Odin of that, which he did here. Maybe the other gods wouldn't dare, but Loki did. So Odin is willing to accept this insult because of the knowledge that he would have gained from having Seiðr Magic, right? So again, that's kind of my point. That's my point about this. Again, everything I'm talking about here is the sacrifices and the danger, the insults that Odin took upon himself to learn, to gain knowledge. Okay, that's it for Seiðr. And the next thing is about Voluspa as a whole. Okay, so we'll get to that. So Voluspa, as a whole, Voluspa is... Okay, so Odin is getting information from a vulva. A vulva is a seeress, a woman with knowledge of the future, for example. But he raises one from the dead, right? So this is using his necromancy. And she knew a lot about the ancient times, like the beginning, even before the world was made. So it's like the creation myth with Gunningap, the void, creation of the realms, the Ymir, the first giant, of course, creation of Midgard from Ymir's body, all of that stuff. The first war, Aesir and Vanir War. So maybe the first half of the Voluspa is like a history lesson. But the second half is much more important because that's about the eschatology, about the end, about Ragnarok. And she goes into quite a lot of detail about how it starts and who dies and what happens after Ragnarok. And my idea here, of course, is that Odin needed to know this information because it was his doom. It was not just his doom, it was the doom of the gods, right? More or less all the gods, with a couple of exceptions, will die in Ragnarok. And the world itself will die, and the Yggdrasil will burn, and all the realms will be destroyed. I mean, it's a cyclical cycle, so there will be a new tree and a new realms and a new world and everything, but most of creation will be destroyed during Ragnarok. And as I mentioned previously in the Odin video, he was unaccepting of his fate, which is unusual because of the concept of the Norns. Again, another video about the Norns I made. The Norse accepted fate, as in it was handed out by the Norns. The Norns determined the lifespan of everybody, when you would die, how would you die, and the lifespan of the gods and the giants. All of it was predetermined, right? So very, a very fatalistic culture where your life has already been determined. And Odin himself didn't accept it. This is my idea why, of course, he was so obsessed with knowledge, is because he wanted to find as much as he could to fight against his fate. Not just his fate, but the fate of all the gods and the fate of, creation itself. So that's what Voluspa is about, raising a dead Volva, Ceres, from the dead, to ask her particularly about Ragnarok. And Odin learns a lot of information from her, from this poem, just as he learned a lot of information from Vafthrudnir as well. So there's only a couple of stanzas I want to read to illustrate my point here. So the first one is stanza 1 from Voluspa. Hearing I ask from the holy races, from Heimdall's sons, both high and low, thou wilt, Valfather, that I well relate of the old tales I remember of men long ago. So I relate, that's the Volva talking, right? Thou wilt, Valfather. So basically Odin is questioning her to learn her knowledge. Heimdall's sons, of course, are humans. That's from the Rig. It's another story in the Poetic Edda, where Heimdall, disguised as, has another name called Rig, and he essentially sleeps with different classes of people to create the social classes for the Norse, the Jarl, the Carl, and the Thrall, right? So when they say the sons of Heimdall, they mean people, they mean humans, right? The next stanza I want to look at is 53 and 54. This is about the death of Odin. Again, so it's near the end of the Voluspa, so this is in the Ragnarok section, of course. 53, now comes to Hlin yet another hurt, when Odin fares to fight with the wolf, and Bali's fair slayer seeks out Surt, for there must fall the joy of Frigg. And 54, then comes Sigfather's mighty son, Vithir, to fight with the foaming wolf. In the giant's son does he thrust his sword full to the heart, his father is avenged. Hlin is another name for Frigg, Odin's wife. Another hurt, other translations would say the second sorrow, or Frigg's second sorrow. The first sorrow of Frigg, of course, is when Balder died, right? So the second sorrow of Frigg is when Odin dies, right? And of course, he dies fighting Fenrir, which is of course very well known. And the 54, of course, is Sigfather, Victory Father, Odin's mighty son Vithar. He avenges Odin by killing Fenrir by driving his sword right into the mouth of the wolf, into his heart, and killing him. Right, so that's the death then of the death of Odin and him being avenged. So Odin learns this from the Volva of his own death at Ragnarok. And the last thing to look at is the last stanza, 66. From below the dragon dark comes forth Nithhogg flying from Nithafjol. The bodies of men on his wings he bears, the serpent bright, but now I must sink. So the key point here is now I must sink. After the Volva has told all of the information that she is telling, she sinks back into the ground, so she returns to death, right? She returns to hell. I'll note if you want to know just note in the Norse there, Dreki in the first line. That's the Norse word for dragon. If you are ever interested to know what's the old Norse word for dragon, it's Dreki. So the Volva sinks back into death after she tells all of the information. Okay, so Volva as a whole, Odin is learning specifically about Ragnarok and about his own death. And of course, he's obviously learning all he can to prevent his own doom. Okay, so moving on to the runes from Havamal. Okay, so our sixth item to talk about related to Odin as the god of knowledge are the runes. So very famously from the Havamal poem, which is the second poem in the Poetic Edda, Odin, from stanzas 130, 138, and 139, perhaps the most famous stanzas in all of Norse mythology. He hangs himself, he sacrifices himself on Yggdrasil, or it's interpreted to be Yggdrasil, for 9 nights. And through that sacrifice, when he eventually falls, potentially dies, although that's maybe not very clear, he learns the knowledge of the runes. Now, I think there might be some maybe misunderstanding or misinterpretation. But I think when we're talking about runes here, what we're talking, like the 18 runes that Odin learns through that sacrifice on the tree on Yggdrasil, they're magic songs. The runes are sung. They're sung or they're chanted. The word Galdr, because this is runic magic, which I said before was the male magic. Odin himself was the one who discovered it, right? So he has Seiðr Magic, learned from Freya, and he discovers Galdr, which means chant in Norse, right? It actually means chant. So obviously runes are another thing. Runes are the actual, the elder Futhark runes and the younger Futhark runes. They're an alphabet, right? So I think there's probably a bit of kind of crossover between the two. When people probably are thinking like the actual runes themselves would maybe in some combination or something like that would actually trigger magical effects or something like that. But it seems to me that the runes are they're songs that you would sing. Now, Odin doesn't tell us how to sing all of the 18 runes. That information is not given. He just says what they are and the effect that they have, but he doesn't actually say how to do it, which of course is a very big shame, because any practitioner would love to know exactly how to trigger these magical effects. But that's unknown. Right, that's unknown, but just that there are 18 magic runes, but they are songs. They are songs that are sung. They are Galdr. They are chanted or sung. It's also where the word incantation comes from, like a magical incantation. Chant is in the word incantation. You chant it, right? You sing it, right? So it's not like writing. Because as a person with again, Dungeons and Dragons background, runes were at least in Dungeons and Dragons, they're carved, right? You carve a rune onto something and it has some effect, like it triggers, like a fire rune is one of the spells, and you put it on the book, for example, and if somebody opens the book, it explodes, like an exploding rune, right? So it's carved, and then it has the effect once something happens, right? But I don't think that's at all accurate to Old Norse. They're sung. So let me go through Havamal 138 and 139. Let's read through that. I'm again reading from the Jackson Crawford translation. This is the Wanderer's Havamal. This is in addition to the Poetic Edda I have from him, but this of course includes the Norse. While his Poetic Edda translation does not include the Norse, it's only the English. Okay, so let me go to 138 and I will read. Okay. I know that I hung on a wind-battered tree 9 long nights, pierced by a spear, and given to Odin, myself on that tree, whose roots grow in a place where no one has ever seen. No one gave me food, no one gave me drink. At the end, I peered down. I took up the runes, screaming, I took them, and then I fell. So, again, one of the most famous stanzas from any Edda, any saga, any story. So, 9 long nights, 9 magic number, of course, in Norse, pierced by a spear. So he pierced himself with Gungnir, we would assume. Given to Odin, myself to myself. Odin sacrificed himself to himself. On that tree whose roots grow in a place no one has ever seen. So it's assumed that the tree is Yggdrasil. And this also makes a lot of sense because Yggdrasil, the name Yggdrasil actually means Odin's horse. So the connections there are pretty clear, right? So I'm not really sure anybody would assume that this tree is not Yggdrasil. So 9 nights on the tree, sacrificed to himself, no food, no drink. He looked down and he saw the runes. So this is the learning the knowledge through the sacrifice. I'm not going to go through the 18 runic spells, just because it's not really relevant to what I'm talking about here. But perhaps I'll make another video in the future specifically about the 18 spells. But the 18 spells are going to be from stanzas 146 through 164. So Odin basically describes what they are, but again, quite unfortunate, he doesn't describe how to sing them or how to create the magical effect of the runes of the songs, right? He just says what they are and what they do, but not how to do them, which is a big shame. But I do want to look at the very last stanza, 164. Now the words of the one-eyed are heard in Odin's hall, for the benefit of for the benefit of humans, for the harm of giants. Health to you who speak them, health to you who know them, profit to you who learn them, health to you who hear them. Because that's what Havamal means, right? It's the words. It's another one of these dual kind of meanings. It's either the words of the one-eyed, which of course is Odin, or the words of the High One, again, Odin, right? So whichever way you look at it, Havamal is the wisdom of Odin, right? And I'll talk a bit later about different examples of the advice that Odin gives in Havamal. That'll be my 9th point. That's not necessarily about Odin as a god of knowledge, but it's more about Odin as a god of wisdom, right? So when you hear these words, they'll benefit you. They're bad for giants. They're good for people. They'll bring you health and profit, and it's good to know the knowledge, right? It's good to know the wisdom. Now, I'm not entirely sure what Odin did with the runes, with the magic spells that he learned. I don't know if they help them in any particular way. I'm not really aware of any other stories where he used some of these spells to any good effect. There could be. I'm just not aware of it. But again, it is knowledge that he learned, and it is he literally sacrificed himself to learn the knowledge of the runes. So it was important for him to do so. Okay, that's it about the runes. So next I'm going to talk about is the sacrifice of his eye. So our 7th piece of information, or let's call it evidence, for Odin as the god of knowledge is about his eye. Odin, of course, many pictures of him show him to be one-eyed, because he lost his eye. And this is the story of Mimir's well, and it comes from Gylfaginning, chapter 15, near the beginning, and there's also a little bit also from Voluspa 27. So I'm going to read through these, and then we'll kind of talk about it. But under that root, which turns towards the rime giants, is Mimir's well, wherein wisdom and understanding are stored. And he is called Mimir, who keeps the well. He is full of ancient lore, since he drinks of the well from the Gjallarhorn. Thither came Allfather, and craved one drink of the well, but he got it not until he had laid his eye in pledge. So says Voluspa, all I know, Odin, where the eye thou hiddest in the wide-renowned well of Mimir. Mimir drinks mead every morning from Valfather's wage. Wit ye yet or what? Okay, so let's break this down. Under that root, so Mimir's well is under Yggdrasil. Yggdrasil branches off into three areas. One of them is under Jotunheim, because that's the turns towards the Rime giants. So that's Jotunheim, so the giants. This is where we believe that Mimir was a giant, was a Jotnar. Although it does get kind of confusing because there's another Mimir also known for being very wise. So if this Mimir is very wise, and the Mimir that was exchanged as a hostage at the end of the Aesir-Vanir War was also very wise, it kind of implies that it's the same person. But there's a problem, which I can't really resolve. The problem is this Mimir is a giant, it seems to be, because he's at the base of Jotunheim. And the other giant was exchanged. Remember when the end of the war, the Aesir gave two presumably Aesir gods as hostages to the Vanir, and the Vanir gave, it was either two or three, I know Frey and Freya, maybe Nialth as well, I forget. But Honir and Mimir were the ones exchanged to give to the Vanir. And of course, they had the problem there where Honir wasn't wise. The Vanir ended up killing both of them, and they sent their heads back to the Aesir, and Odin has the head of Mimir to advise him. It seems strange to me that if Mimir was a giant, then why would a giant be accepted as a hostage when it's a Vanir Aesir exchange of hostages, right? So the math doesn't add up there. But it does appear to be the same person. And that also means that this story here has to predate the Aesir-Vanir War. And the Aesir-Vanir War is very, very early on. It's described very early in the Voluspa. It's considered to be the first war in creation. But Odin would have visited the well to get the drink, because Mimir was whole here. He wasn't dead and he wasn't a head. So this part must have happened before he lost his head. And that was a result, of course, of the hostage exchange. So Mimir, Odin drinking from the well of Mimir must be very, 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 very early on. Odin would have been full of knowledge and wisdom for the majority of his lifespan, I suppose. Okay, let's continue reading. All right, so under that root, Yggdrasil, which turns towards Rime giants, Jotunheim, is Mimir's well. So we're assuming Mimir is a Jotun, is a giant, wherein wisdom and understanding are stored. Okay? He's called Mimir, who keeps the well. So it's his well. Of course, if you look at the Norse, it says Mimir's Brunner, right? Brunner means well, so Mimir's well. And he drinks of the well from Gjallarhorn. Okay, this part very much confuses me, because Gjallarhorn is Heimdall's horn. So, well, actually, if Mimir subsequently, no. Well, yeah, it still confuses me because, okay, like, maybe Mimir had Gjallarhorn first, and then after he died, Heimdall claimed it. something like that. So Gjallarhorn is Heimdall's famous horn that he blows to let the Aesir know and the Vanir know that Ragnarok has started. So it's a very, very important, item, right? And the Voluspa 27 actually talks about that instead of Odin's eye. Well, in addition to Odin's eye. So let's have a look at that really quick. Voluspa 27. I know of the horn of Heimdall, hidden under the high-reaching holy tree. On it there pours from Valfather's pledge a mighty stream. Would you know yet more? So here it talks about Heimdall's horn, which is Gjallarhorn. Although it's not mentioned directly as that in the Norse. In the Norse, it's, how do I say this word? Hjoth, which means sound. But in the Gylfaginning, it directly says Gjallarhorni, right? So it directly says the name of it, right? So it's a bit confusing. Why would Heimdall hide his horn with the giant? Kind of doesn't really make sense. So perhaps Mimir had it first. He was using it to, he was using it as a drinking horn, drinking from the well every day. That's why he was so wise and so knowledgeable. And maybe after he was exchanged as a hostage and he lost his head, then maybe Heimdall claimed Gjallarhorn because he uses it later, of course. I don't know. I'm just thinking aloud. So thither came Allfather, Odin, and he craved one drink from the well. So he wanted to drink from the well. He wanted knowledge. He wanted wisdom. But he got it not until he laid his eye in pledge. In other words, he had to sacrifice his eye for that drink, which he did. So he plucked out his own eye, and he, I don't know if he left it like in the area of the well or he literally dropped it in the well. I don't know. And yeah, that's, Mimir drinks mead every morning from Valfather's wage. Valfather's wage, of course, being the sacrifice of his eye. Yeah, I think that's all I need to say there about, I'm just looking at the Norse just to see if anything pops out. No, it seems to be straightforward to me. Well, sorry, no, not straightforward. Nothing comes to mind that I want to mention. Sometimes when I look at the Norse, it brings something to my attention, right? Like, for example, Gjallarhorni being mentioned here. So, Odin, again, related to him and knowledge, he sacrificed, again, same common theme. He sacrificed his eye for a drink from the Well of Mimir, in which he gained tremendous knowledge and wisdom. And apparently he did that very, very early on, before the Aesir-Vanir War. And then one thing I hadn't actually talked about, of course, was the Mimir losing his head, because that's another source of wisdom and knowledge for Odin, is because he embalmed the head and he talks to the head, and he asks, and the head of Mimir will answer questions for Odin. All right. Okay, so two more things to talk about. Next is the Mead of Poetry. So I've already made a video about the Mead of Poetry in quite a lot of detail, and that's the Odin as the God of Poetry video. So I'm not gonna talk very much about it here, because I've already talked about it, right? But just to kind of recap a little bit, the Mead of Poetry story is found in Skáldskaparmál, chapters 5 and 6, and that's also in the Prose Edda. And what I want to talk about related to knowledge is that the person that his blood was used to make the Mead of Poetry when he was killed by those two dwarves, Kvasir, he was said to be the wisest and the most knowledgeable, and no one could ask him a question he was unable to answer, right? So Odin goes on this big journey, quest, whatever you want to call it, to steal the Mead of Poetry from Suttungr, from the giant. Because I believe, not only related to him as a god of poetry, but also because he wanted the knowledge from that, because the Mead of Poetry is not just, you know, good for skalds, good for poets. It doesn't just give elegance of speech or charisma or, you know, effective, you know, guile or manipulation or deception, but it also imparts knowledge and wisdom as well. So that was another area that Odin was interested in getting. If you want more details on that, you can check out my Odin as God of Poetry video. I go into a lot of detail about the exact journey to claim the Mead of Poetry in that video. So the last, this is the 9th thing to talk about, is Odin's advice in the Havamal poem. So let's look at some of that. So, Havamal, the wisdom of Odin. So, not exactly related to Odin as the god of knowledge, but I would definitely say it's related to Odin as the god of wisdom. So, I'm going to read about 6 or 7 different stanzas from this. It's all advice. It's Odin's advice. Some of it's about love, some of it's about hospitality, some of it's about wisdom. So I'm just going to read through a couple of, several stanzas just to kind of get the point that wisdom and knowledge is important in Odin's point of view, because it's the words of him. It's the words of Odin, right? It's the wisdom of Odin, or the advice of Odin, or I think technically the words of Odin is what Havamal means. So, stanza 6. A wise man is not showy about his wisdom. He guards it carefully. He is silent when he comes to a stranger's home. Harm seldom befalls the watchful man, for you can never have a more faithful friend than a good supply of wisdom. Okay, don't need to explain that. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. And the next stanza, stanza 7. The watchful guest, when he arrives for a meal, should keep his mouth shut, listening with his ears and watching with his eyes. That is how the wise man finds his way. Okay. Stanza 10. A traveler cannot bring a better burden on the road than plenty of wisdom. It will prove better than money in an unfamiliar place. Wisdom is the comfort of the poor. Oh, by the way, again, I'm reading from Jackson Crawford's translation of the Wanderer's Havamal. Stanza 18. Only a man who is wide-traveled and has wandered far can know something about how other men think. Such a man is wise. So the wisdom of being well-traveled, right? 55. Skip ahead here. You should be only a little wise, never too wise. A wise man's heart is seldom glad if he's truly wise. So this is like a caution, I'd say, a caution of being too wise, because if you know too much, it's probably related or similar to the what's an idiom, I guess. What is it? If ignorance is bliss, 'tis folly to be wise. Yeah, that's the exact quote. Yeah, everybody says ignorance is bliss, but they're actually forgetting the first word, if ignorance is bliss, and of course the rest of it, right? So people just say ignorance is bliss, which is not the full quote, not the full idiom, right? If ignorance is bliss, 'tis folly to be wise, and that probably makes a lot of sense. So this is a warning in a similar way. Stanza 65. You will often get repayment in kind for the words you speak to others. Repayment in kind for the words you speak to others. When I looked at that, I thought that maybe it's like the words you speak to them might be like words of knowledge or words of education, and that could be true, but I guess it could also be gracious words or complimentary words, so not necessarily related to knowledge, but it could be. It could be. And one more to look at, just because this one's a little bit funny. No man should mock another for falling in love. Love is strong enough to make a fool out of a man who once was wise. It's like, yeah. Very true. Very, very true. All right, so let's conclude this. I think it's a very, very long video. So I actually don't know how long this video is because I've made it over a couple of days, doing some research and of course making up parts of it and putting it all together at the end. I actually don't know how long it is. I'm assuming it's well over an hour. So a kind of a conclusion to all of this is that I prepared 9 pieces of evidence for Odin as the god of knowledge. Hugin and Munin, Vafthrudnismal Poem, Grímnismál Poem, Seiðr Magic, Voluspa, the runes, of course, the Well of Mimir, the Mead of Poetry, and the Wisdom of Havamal, all collectively. And I think I've kind of come to the conclusion or the idea that Odin is not accepting of his fate to be killed by Fenrir at Ragnarok, his fate for his creation, Midgard, because him and his brothers created Midgard, to be destroyed, and for all the realms to be destroyed, Asgard, Yggdrasil to burn. He doesn't accept any of this. So he's fighting against his own fate, although it's apparently hopeless, because when the Norns have decreed something, then that's how it is, and there's no way around it, right? So in the combination of Odin as a god of death, with his Einherjar and his Valkyrie, preparing an army to battle at Ragnarok, because if it's all pointless, he wouldn't be bothering with it, right? If the end result is going to be the end result, then he wouldn't bother with all of the the creation of the Einherjar army, but he is, because hopefully, well, he thinks that he can beat fate, or he can win. And every sacrifice that he does along the way, losing his eye, maybe killing himself, but hanging himself from Yggdrasil, risking his thought and his memory, Hugin and Munin, all of these things, being tortured in Grímnismál, all of these things are, they show the lengths to which Odin will go to increase his knowledge. I don't think it's about power. Some people might think it is, that he's power hungry and he just wants more knowledge and more power. I don't think so, personally. I think it's because he knows his fate in Ragnarok, and maybe he's hoping that, maybe this extra little piece of information that he might find will help him find a way out of it, right? Find a way to beat his fate, right? So that's where the obsession, I believe, for Odin as a god of knowledge comes from, knowledge and wisdom. He knows he's going to die at Ragnarok, and he's doing everything he can to try to prevent it. But it doesn't appear that he will be able to do that. Okay, this is the longest video I've ever made. Thank you for watching. If you have watched to the end, I appreciate your attention. I said a lot of stuff in this video. If I was wrong about anything, if anybody has any better ideas, please comment, and we could have a discussion in the comments. Thank you for your time and your attention. Take care. Bye-bye.